still alive today. And it just got worse and worse and worse. And I mean,
but still, the air is less polluted, the water is less polluted. As countries get richer, they pollute less. When they're industrializing, they pollute more. There might be individual environmental toxins, yes, but as a broad description of the status of OECD countries, we are polluting on net less.
It depends on where you live, first of all.
Yeah. That's right.
Out here in California, I believe I'm breathing in the fire.
Bill Maher recently welcomed Douglas Murray, Senator Tina Smith, and another Democratic guest to debate the UK Parliament's decision defining a woman by biological sex. The conversation quickly turned electric. Murray offered a clever, pointed argument, while Senator Smith delivered a careful, but questionable explanation of the Democratic Party's stance. Maher wasn't having it. His response was firm, direct, and one of the most memorable moments of the night. We've queued up every highlight so you can see exactly how it unfolded. Settle in and subscribe so you don't miss a single detail.
Big ruling this week in England. The Supreme Court, their definition of woman is biological sex. To put it in shorthand, J.K. Rowling won.
Yes. J.K. Rowling won. Everyone who said this for years has won. All the, particularly women who've been defamed and lied about and bullied and chased and much more for years, they were right. And I just think, apart from being a statement of the obvious, isn't it amazing that the best legal minds in Britain spent years having to work out the first thing we knew as a species?
Across the country, some of the nation's most celebrated legal minds continue to wrestle with a question humanity recognized long ago. What defines a woman? Lawmakers and policy shapers seem to revisit an issue that previous generations, farmers, philosophers, and families never considered mysterious. For centuries, societies everywhere held a clear understanding. Yet in recent years, a small but influential group has challenged that clarity, introducing complex theories about gender that often create more confusion than consensus. The debate has become less about facts and more about cultural conflict, leaving many to wonder why something so fundamental now feels unsettled.
But just to be clear, we're not saying there's not such a thing as trans, right? We're not saying there's not such a thing as someone who is, quote unquote, born in the wrong body.
I don't think people get born in the wrong body now.
Oh, I do.
I do.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's a default setting for humans.
Yeah.
We should acknowledge that. It's not just every time there's a baby, ooh, who knows what the fuck it is. That's crazy. But there are...
Beyond me, yeah.
But there are variations.
There are variations.
Homosexuality.
That's right. It's a continuum.
And then, but it's how we handle that.
That's right.
I mean, and I think we would agree that, children, and this is where America is now an outlier country. We're the only country that went full, and I guess Trump is reversing it, but certainly under Biden, who went fully toward that. Like, we don't care what age, kids can self-diagnose themselves. I mean, that to me was going way too far on that.
Supporters of gender transition often speak of feeling misaligned with their own bodies, a deeply personal experience sometimes called gender dysphoria. Everyone deserves empathy and the freedom to describe their identity. But medical and legal debates cannot ignore biological realities. Chromosomes and physiology remain unchanged by personal expression or medical treatment. Today, however, even acknowledging basic biological categories can spark accusations of intolerance. The tension highlights a difficult truth. Personal identity and biological sex can coexist in conversation, but one does not erase the other. Recognizing that distinction is essential to sound policy and respectful dialogue.
Nobody just comes back to the sensible center.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the sensible center is that, you respect people, you trust parents, you let parents figure out what to do with their kids, and you don't need a bunch of politicians in Washington making decisions about
that. That is not the Democratic position, at least here in California.
Well, that's my position.
I'm good. I think that's where the Democratic Party should. That is not the position that we've had here in California, which is don't tell the parents what the kids are doing at school. That's and that you really alienate voters.
During the discussion, Senator Smith argued that her party does not advocate teaching children to embrace gender transition. Critics, however, point to years of proposals that give minors increasing authority over medical choices while limiting parental input. The question is complex. How to balance a young person's well-being with the need for informed consent and family involvement. Some proposals would even penalize parents for resisting certain treatments, raising concerns about government overreach. Maher pressed this point sharply, underscoring the stakes when ideology intersects with family rights and medical ethics.
What I read in the paper is he did speak on it this week. And I did not agree with the point of view of the article I was reading, which was that he's completely crazy because he was saying it's not mostly genetic, it's mostly environmental toxins. I happen to believe that's probably a more likely answer. And they were saying, well, no, genetics. And of course, genetics is involved in everything health-wise. But to present the argument I saw framed in that way, that he's a kook because he thinks it's coming. I mean, environmental toxins is really the story of my lifetime. I'm glad I was born as old as I am at a time when everything wasn't completely polluted.
Maher then shifted to a familiar political pattern. When public figures break from party lines, debate often gives way to personal attacks. Rather than engage with ideas, opponents may resort to labeling or dismissing those who disagree. Figures like Donald Trump, J.D. Vance, and Robert F. Kennedy Jr. have each faced sharp criticism, sometimes less for the specifics of their arguments and more for stepping outside expected political boundaries. Maher noted that challenging group orthodoxy can invite swift backlash, a dynamic that discourages open conversation and thoughtful dissent across the political spectrum. The panel next tackled environmental responsibility. Wealthy nations often present themselves as leaders in sustainability, but the reality is more complicated. High-income countries continue to generate massive amounts of plastic waste and frequently export it to less affluent nations, effectively shifting the burden. Meanwhile, many developing regions struggle with outdated equipment and infrastructure that release harmful emissions. This global imbalance reveals that environmental impact is not simply about wealth or technology, but about consumption, waste management, and accountability across borders. Maher emphasized that economic prosperity doesn't automatically equal environmental virtue. Cleaner technology is valuable, but it's only part of the story. From plastics that pollute the oceans to industries built on overproduction and constant consumer demand, environmental harm extends well beyond the latest gadgets or renewable energy breakthroughs. His argument was clear: without addressing the full spectrum of waste and resource use, claims of green leadership remain incomplete. No matter how advanced a country's technology may appear, the conversation then turned to the long-standing strategy of identity-based campaigning. For decades, U.S. political parties have appealed to voters along lines of race, gender, or cultural background. That approach once helped candidates, including Barack Obama, build broad coalitions. But Maher suggested the tactic now risks alienating voters who want to be treated as individuals, not demographics. Communities have grown more diverse and complex, making simple categories less relevant. Increasingly, people prioritize practical solutions over symbolic gestures. Maher concluded that American politics is evolving faster than some party strategies. Many voters have multicultural identities or global perspectives that defy narrow labels. Relying on racial or identity-based messaging can appear dismissive or outdated, assuming voters are defined by a single characteristic. If political leaders fail to adapt, they risk losing both elections and cultural relevance. The takeaway is clear: citizens expect policies that address real problems and respect their intelligence, not slogans that reduce them to checkboxes. That wraps up today's breakdown. If you found this analysis helpful, consider subscribing and turning on notifications so you'll catch every future update.